All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Kelly. I'm a solutions engineer here at Octopus Deploy, joined by Graham, who is a resident architect at HashiCorp. Actually, fun fact, I used to work over at Hashi, so Graham and I go way back. We thought today would be a good opportunity to present to you on a topic that we thought was pretty relevant in the field that we operate and one that we come across very frequently. So the title of our session today is Bridging the Gap, Empowering Dev Teams with Argo CD and Terraform at Scale.
Hey, everybody. Kelly, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for inviting me to present at Shipped. I'm very excited to talk about some firsthand experience that I have with unifying DevOps processes. I think we really have a better together story that makes a big difference. All right, so yeah, I have the privilege of kicking things off. So today we're going to be going through kind of a case study. All right, this case study is every bank, and every bank is literally every bank. I have a lot of experience working with large banks and the world's largest financial institutions. I see this pattern repeated over and over. It's a pitfall that many companies fall into, and I think we together, Octopus and HashiCorp, have a really good story to tell for how to get out of this mess. Right, so banks grow by acquiring smaller banks and other financial institutions. Like, that's part of their core value proposition. However, this inevitably leads to challenges when a bank acquires a smaller bank that has incompatible cloud or DevOps processes, incompatible governance. It just creates a lot of sprawl and incompatibility. And this winds up creating hidden costs. Is actually one of the main things that is a big deal for the companies that are doing the acquiring. They're acquiring these banks because they do something well, right? Because they make money. There's a hidden cost to integrating these companies after acquisition, and that hidden cost is buried in the challenge of unifying their DevOps processes. What's usually offered by these companies, and this is firsthand experience, is that they offer a manual process for doing this integration, right? So you're a company that got acquired. You're an app developer. You're very excited to be part of a larger organization, and you want to participate in the governance structure and the new cloud offerings that every bank has to offer. It should be pretty straightforward, right? Well, you wind up filing a bunch of tickets, waiting around for a response. It's very dispiriting, and eventually, as somebody who's trying to do the right thing, you wind up saying, like, I don't have time for this. I'm wasting time. I'm wasting money, and so you wind up just kind of like resisting the integration, which is a problem, as we'll see here in a little bit, because it creates friction that keeps the different business units of every bank isolated from each other. DevOps chaos, the impact of a mixed estate. I think I painted a pretty good picture of like how every bank got into this mess, and what exactly does it mean to inherit a mixed estate, right? That sounds like a very innocuous term, but it gives a lot of people at every bank heartburn. Specifically, Terraform is used everywhere, but no two teams are using it the same way. They've got different modules, they've got different naming patterns, and more importantly, they have different security baselines. The main challenge for every bank is the latter one, right? The one thing that they can't tolerate is risk, so that they can't just leave things as they are. They can't just say, you guys are on your own. You did a pretty good job so far. Let's just go ahead and let you keep operating the way you are. They're forced by their auditors to make a change here, and that creates some issues. Teams wind up adopting Argo CD for continuous deployment, but they've got multiple installations of it. It's hard to wrangle all these processes. They've got many different environments and environment models, and it becomes a headache. So you're the CTO. what do, right? You need a plan that reduces risk, but increases the velocity of your developers. You and your leadership team must steer the bank towards a unified technology estate that encourages collaboration. All the while, you need to minimize the disruption on the teams, right? You don't want to kill the golden goose because every bank just acquired a business unit that is generating revenue. However, there's a risk of continuing to do things the same way. So a unified delivery lifecycle involves Terraform, Octopus, and Argo CD. And the predictability that these tools bring together unifies delivery in a way that is scalable, secure, and cost effective. How does Terraform Enterprise help in this regard? Terraform is sort of the foundation of your DevOps estate. It deploys the infrastructure, and it embodies governance and compliance with visibility baked in. There are ways to do this manually. They just take forever, right? The wrong way to do it, as I indicated before, is that you have a manual ticketing system. And this probably sounds familiar to every director ever, right? You've got a manual ticketing system. Somebody throws the request over the wall. Maybe somebody gets back to you in a timely fashion. They probably don't. Maybe your infrastructure looks the way it needs to, and maybe it's secure. It's very unpredictable and unknowable, and honestly, it's ungovernable, right? The right way to do it is to use Terraform Enterprise. This creates a unified platform where governance and controls and auditability and cost effectiveness are actually baked in. The term shift left applies here. You wind up granting developers the ability to self-serve their infrastructure in a way that's born compliant, so that they don't have to worry about participating in a long risk exception process or attesting to the justification of the cost of their cloud infrastructure. All of that stuff has been mandated and taken off their plate, and allows the app devs to actually do what they were purchased to do, which is make the application that is actually key to every bank's bottom line. You create adult supervision that helps everybody in the estate operate more effectively and without isolation. They can cooperate a lot more smoothly.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that great framing, kind of introducing us to who every bank is as a persona, what their main problems are. I hope some people in the audience, probably some of those points resonated with them. They're like, you know what, that use case sounds familiar. I'm dealing with that a lot myself. And also thank you for kind of presenting Terraform. I love to talk about Terraform. I did it at HashiCorp, and I still do it today, every single day at Octopus, because so many of our customers are using Terraform. And what Graham just kind of touched on there and set us up nicely is kind of the day zero problem, right? And that is the infrastructure provisioning. So what Terraform does a great job of doing is allowing self-service, allowing those guardrails, a compliant workflow to create and spin up the infrastructure that you need to deploy applications, right? Because at the end of the day, where you're really getting monetary value from your organization is you want to create applications that are continuously churning out new features. And you can't do that if you don't have the infrastructure in place to deploy those applications. One way that a lot of that feature development gets stalled is when you don't have a process, you don't have a tool in place like Terraform that enables you to do it. So with that being said, let's dive into kind of the day one, right? Because when we talk about what it takes to get an application out to production, you often hear day zero, day one, day two. We chatted about day zero with Terraform. Let's talk about Argo CD. So as a CTO or any other technical decision maker or technical person on this call, you might very well keep hearing Argo CD. I certainly I think it's been around for years and it's been loved for years, but I really feel like it's skyrocketed in its adoption, its usage just in the past couple. Octopus, we've gone to a number of different conferences recently. A lot of folks come up to our booth and they point at the Argo logo and they're like, tell us a little bit more about your integration. Like, tell us how do you work with Argo? We love Argo. And a great thing is we actually have some of the top maintainers, contributors to the open source Argo project at Octopus. So the reason Argo is so great is it's an open source tool, and what it excels at is Kubernetes deployments. Developers like it because it honestly abstracts away a lot of the technical, like intricate details of Kubernetes, and it allows you to do exactly what you want, is just get your applications out to K8 clusters. And it's built on the premise of GitOps. And GitOps is the methodology that everything should be sent through Git. Git should be the central source of truth, and anything outside of that is out of compliance. It's not the workflow that we want for our developers. So what Argo CD will do is not only allow all changes to Git to be implemented in Kubernetes, but in the event that a nefarious user or actor goes in and makes a change to the application on the cluster itself outside of Git, Argo will also recognize that and can automatically remediate the application. Or if any things happen or occur with the Kubernetes resources themselves, like the pods, it can have an automatic remediation and spin those resources back up. So that's the value prop of Argo. That's why folks love it. The challenges, though, with Argo is that it wasn't designed to really mimic an enterprise-grade continuous delivery solution. It doesn't have the concept of environments, dev, staging, test, production. It doesn't have that. So a lot of the times developers will have these ad hoc solutions that they create. They'll append -dev, -staging, -prod, -prod US West too, et cetera, onto individual applications. And you have no way of logically grouping some together, right? Because hypothetically, all of those, the dev, the staging, the prod, should be the same base application code with just some slight nuances depending on the environment. But now when you're just basically appending or changing the name of it, you're creating kind of isolated applications. So it doesn't have that environment, it doesn't have that product grouping that you're looking for. And oftentimes your developers end up having to use, glitter glue and duct tape to kind of stitch together a more well-rounded CD solution. So like I just kind of stated here, and Graham mentioned earlier, managing one application, managing just a handful, or maybe just having a couple of developers using Argo CD, yeah, it's relatively straightforward. It's relatively doable. The problem really comes in is when you're trying to add complexity. So imagine now, instead of just one Argo CD instance with 10 applications, you now have 5 to 10 instances with hundreds to thousands of applications, and similarly hundreds to thousands of Kubernetes clusters. So now you could potentially be dedicating a DevOps engineer or an individual just to the maintenance of Argo CD. So there's really no single pane of glass. You're logging in and out of these instances, trying to track down where these, each of these individual applications reside. So no sense of RBAC. Again, no environmental progression.
That's totally every bank. Every bank has thousands of applications. Every bank has thousands of Argo CD installations. Every bank has tens of thousands of developers. So every bank is struggling with exactly that kind of scalability. And Argo CD was the perfect solution for the business units before they got acquired. And it's become a bit of a quagmire post-acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of chat about what's the solution to this problem that I just posed, right? And in my mind's eye, it's really Octopus. I think Octopus fits in well with this problem that we're facing with scaling Argo CD. So, if there's any CTOs listening or folks who, you're aware that Octopus is in your tool stack, but you're not too familiar with the intricacies of it, at the end of the day, it's really developed to be an enterprise-grade CD solution. So a little bit of background, a lot of folks, they might adopt an all-in-one solution, or they might do a lot of custom scripting, which again, similar issue to the Argo, the primary Argo issue is that works well at a small scale. But imagine trying to have hundreds of custom scripts just to get your applications out to staging and QA and production. So what Octopus provides is it provides environments clearly defined: development, staging, test, production. It allows you to logically group applications together and define a promotion lifecycle for that. So in your Octopus deployment process, if your developers want to reference the unit tests that they need to run, the smoke tests that they need to run, if they want to attach an SBOM with their deployment artifact, those are all capabilities that you can have all within the platform itself. So how does that relate to Argo? What I pointed out and what Grandma just was touching on there, again, the environment progression, something that's lacking in Argo, you could get with Octopus, and it will allow you to have that single pane of glass, onboard all of those hundreds, tens, hundreds of Argo CD instances that you currently have, and have it all on the Octopus platform. And just integrate with the existing RBAC controls or ITSM integrations that you're currently leveraging.
That, by the way, every bank has that problem, right? So GitOps sounds good when at small scale, and it does exactly what it is promised. Argo CD delivers on exactly what is needed. But as any dev can tell you, like trying to integrate your GitHub workflows with your Active Directory, with your groups, with your approval workflows that are baked into some other third-party tool, it's a nightmare. Every bank has this issue, and every bank needs Octopus as the glue between their infrastructure and their deployments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I just kind of touched on this, but it's onboarding, like I said, your multiple Argo CD instances in all of the Kubernetes clusters, all of those applications onto the platform. So now rather than having, kind of a stitched together naming convention of -dev, -prod, whatnot on Argo CD, you can logically map that application to a project in Octopus and then still define the subsequent, dev, test, staging, production environments. And you'll also be able to retrieve the live object status, the last deployment, the health of both your application and your Kubernetes resources directly on the Octopus platform. So kind of tying this all together. And, Graham, you brought up a good point about GitOps. The reason that folks love Argo and they don't want to go away from it is because GitOps is a really reputable, style of deployment. And you can continue to support that with Octopus. You can integrate that into the platform. You can still, force all changes to your applications to be going through Git, for Git to be the central source of truth. But I think, and maybe this will kind of, lead into our discussion, Graham, but the interesting point is that you have this developer team, maybe you have multiple developer teams at this company that was acquired, and they're holding tightly onto Argo. They're like, we don't want to let go of Argo. Like we love it. We work well with it. And you get to tell them, you don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to, you can continue to use that. But listen, we at the acquiring bank, at every bank, we have some dev teams. They're already using Octopus, and they're actually using Octopus for some traditional style deployments, some IaaS servers. Maybe they're doing some mainframe with IBM, whatever the case might be. Like Octopus can field like multiple deployment styles. So you don't have to restrict yourself to one or the other. You can just bring them under the same umbrella.
Yeah. And so what you were just describing makes me think that, right, what I want from a GitOps, as a developer at every bank, want from a GitOps deployment is I want declarative deployments, right? I want to declare this is the way it looks. Now just go make it look that way, right? And don't add anything extra. If something bad happens, I want you to rebalance my deployment. That has real power. And if there's a very short line between my laptop and production, that works great. I can just write up some code, containerize it, declare a deployment, and off it goes. Every bank has a much longer process, right? Like, because every bank processes trillions of dollars of transactions in a month, right? Every bank holds tens of trillions of dollars of assets under management, right? Like the scale doesn't allow you to just kind of wing it when it comes to approval processes, right? So I know I can deploy provisioned, secure, born compliant infrastructure that meets my needs, and I can self-serve it. And I know for sure that I can declare a deployment that looks exactly, and I can trust Argo CD to make it look that way. How do I participate in an automated workflow that actually cooperates and embodies every bank's deployment processes? And
Yeah.
that's totally Octopus, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, and I think this is definitely a thread that we should pull on, right? Because if I'm a CTO listening to this conversation, I'm kind of thinking, all right, that's all well and good. I have these 3 tools, I'm keeping them in my tool stack, but like, how am I controlling who gets to operate Terraform, who gets to do these things with Argo and these things with Octopus? Well, that's where kind of the intricacies of both all of these platforms couple together, right? So with Terraform, you mentioned it at the beginning, you get to define your Sentinel policies that create guardrails around the infrastructure that's provisioned for applications. Well, then in Octopus, you get to also define what customers, or sorry, I should say, what developers are allowed to go to development, what developers are allowed to be an approver, be a manual approver during an intervention step. Who can edit a deployment process versus who can't. And if you wanted to go so far as to create a template, and you as the engineering lead, the app team lead, you get to define, this is what our deployment process is. It consists of these steps. This is where you're deploying your Terraform. This is where you're doing some database changes. This is where you're actually deploying your site itself. This is where, XYZ. You can define that template, and then you push it out. This is all on the Octopus platform. You're pushing it out to your developers, and they can just select, I want to choose that template. I'm going to consume that. And then if their manager ever wants to make a change to it, they change the template, they version it, they publish it, and their developer, who's the downstream consumer of it, now has the new compliant template. And they don't even have to think about how to deploy, or they don't have to worry about if they have the right permissions. It's already been decided for them.
Yeah. So what pops into my mind when I hear this in reducing risk, this is exactly what I was just about to talk about. Every bank has a permit to operate process, and a permit to operate process is long, it's tedious, it is not self-serve, but it exists for a very good reason. And that good reason is that as a CTO, and as a CTO, my peer is the CISO, right? And the CISO is like, I'm not going to let you guys just like dump anything onto my public cloud. We're going to have to go step by step and make sure that everything is compliant, everything is well architected, and that your software development lifecycle adheres to our best practices. Well, guess what? Terraform Enterprise lets you actually just take the controls that cyber has handed down as requirements for compliance in your permit to operate process. You just bake them in as Sentinel policies, throw them into TFE. It's impossible to deploy something that is non-compliant. So you've just scratched that whole step off your list. And so TFE helps solve the baseline infrastructure compliance problem. Octopus does the same. You just described a permit to operate process that every bank has. That's how they comply with the regulations, such that they're auditable, it's trackable, and it uses least privilege RBAC controls. This is how you eliminate or dramatically reduce your permit to operate process. So every bank's CTO really cares about this solution, not for the details, but for what it actually eliminates process-wise. You keep your compliance, you keep your governance, you keep your auditability, and you dramatically increase developer velocity. So that's really what this is about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I couldn't have said it better, Graham. I think you summarized it really well. It's There's a lot of implications, like you said, as you kind of introed when we first began this discussion. I think, Graham, when you and I were thinking the other day and kind of ideating on this talk and what we wanted to talk about, you used a fun kind of visual, which I like. I wanted to bring it in, but you were like, yeah, when this acquisition goes through, everyone's popping the confetti and shaking hands, and we're excited. Like, this is great. Let's go. Let's get off to the races. But there's an unfortunate reality behind that. It's like we've done that. This great event has taken place, but now you have to look like what is actually our path to profitability and actually integrating this entire new operations team, developers team, the tool set into what we currently do. Where do we decide like how this is all going to flow together? And a lot of times folks, like, I mean, it's years down the line before they figure this out, and years down the line means millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are lost in kind of, honestly, a lot of like shadow IT operations, because it's easy to neglect or not realize the monetary value that's attributed to having to maintain these systems manually. So if you can automate what you were just mentioning there, Graham, like the compliance, the auditing, and also the process with which your developers can push to production, like you are really seeing your time to value for that acquisition.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's about time to value, right? A lot of really smart people did due diligence to research this acquisition and make sure it pencils out. There's a clock ticking once the acquisition happens for that math to pencil out. And if you blow past that limit, you're eating into your margins, and somebody's going to be wrong and probably get fired, right? So you need a path to ease of use, ease of integration. Terraform has the acquisition. Terraform has the infrastructure piece of the acquisition completely nailed down. But Terraform is not how you deploy and manage your applications. And you need a flexible framework that can kind of ranch all these different tens, hundreds, and thousands of applications. Because guess what? If you fall behind on this one acquisition, bringing them into the fold, there's due diligence happening right now on your next acquisition, and every bank is about to pour some more gas on that fire, right? So I can't stress enough. This stack, I would almost like orient it as a line. This platform that is broad shoulders to stand on. If you're a CTO, if you're a CISO at every bank, like, I know you know the pain that I'm talking about, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, this is how you should solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, Graham and I, we had multiple kind of working sessions to chat through this, and oftentimes we would talk for like an hour just with each other, at each other, like bouncing ideas, because every day Graham and I have, a number of customer conversations, and it's with financial institutions and folks from all different industries, all different verticals, and they're all facing this problem too. I think that's important to note. It's like this absolutely applies to banks, but it also applies to, medical care practices, local governments, all different, types of folks who have an application. They have multiple application or developer teams. They're going through an acquisition. They have all of these tools that they're presented with and trying to figure out what needs to be kept or not. And I think, as you alluded to, Graham, as you surmised, like, this stack here is an extremely powerful one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it in action. It really does work. It solves exactly the problem that we're describing. You make a really good point. Number one, every bank is not any bank. It's not any one bank. It's literally every bank.
Yeah.
But two, that's just, we picked that example. We picked every bank because it is the easiest way to visualize how rapidly acquisitions grow. It's like kudzu. They just proliferate and it's the easiest way to get into trouble. But this happens all the time with new applications being developed by teams that are allowed to operate in a silo. And one team prefers Azure, and another team prefers GCP, and another team can only operate on-prem for various reasons. And pretty soon you wind up trying to wrangle DevOps practices that are entirely disparate from each other. And as the CTO and CISO, you guys just can't tolerate that, right? There's too much risk. At some point, something bad is going to happen, and heads are going to roll, right? So better to get out ahead of it, make sure that you understand how to deliver infrastructure that's born compliant, environment-based approval workflows with clear segregation between pre-production, production, approval gates, and GitOps-based deployments that are the gold standard of how you manage containerized workflows. So, I mean, you'd be crazy not to do this, right? The alternative literally is like Bash scripts, PowerShell scripts, some Lambda functions. I mean, it's just an absolute. It's the Wild West.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be clear too, like I know Graham and I have spoken a lot to that CTO, like more that technical decision maker trying to understand their tech landscape, but developers like really are benefit from this as well, right? We're by no means trying to still lock them into a box and say you can only deploy to this cloud, or you can only deploy to Kubernetes, or you can only deploy here. Like, no, that's certainly not the case. It's more of like, how do we create the structure for them to then go do what they do best, which is deploy to multi-cloud environments. Octopus supports Azure, GCP, as you mentioned, or deploy to Kubernetes on those given cloud providers, or deploy to IaaS, deploy to mainframe, whatever the case might be. It doesn't matter if it's legacy style deployments or more Kubernetes style deployments. It can all be done through Octopus, and the products themselves, the applications can at the heart be different than one another, but you still have this overarching structure for how you define how they operate.
Totally, right? Yeah. Argo CD is beloved by developers because it makes deploying easy, right? These are the people that are adding the value. They're writing the application that makes the enterprise tick. And I used the phrase before, but like, you don't want to kill the golden goose, right? This is why you're in business. And in a real sense, all of this overhead is a distraction. It's pure negative from the developer standpoint, right? So these tools are designed to give developers what they want as well. Stay out of their way, increase their velocity, increase self-service, while at the same time providing the guardrails and the compliance and the auditing that is required for sort of like moving into a much larger pool. I think that's super important to keep in mind, right? And that's the bind, right? What always happens at every bank is an app team gets acquired. They were moving with high velocity. That's what made them attractive for acquisition in the first place. Every bank layers on this thick coat of procedure and policy and permit to operate, and everyone hates it because the developers hate it because it gets in the way of them doing what they were supposed to be doing, and every bank's C-suite hates it because it puts everybody behind and it eats into the margins of your acquisition. So, I have enough experience to know that this is the type of automation that is critical for every bank to actually realize the time to value and the value of the acquisitions that they make.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how that went by in the blink of the eye. I just think that's the nature of when you and I get on a call, Graham.
Totally.
Just I don't know. I feel like we could chat for hours, but it's an important use case. Like we said, it's one that we personally encounter every single day. I think you and I love talking about this stuff. So if anyone wants to continue chatting about it, tell us about your use case. You know where to find us, or find Octopus, find HashiCorp. But Graham, thank you so much. I love collaborating. Hopefully we do something like this again in the future. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.